Okay, so today I want to show you how to begin your spider project. And the idea here is you're going to create one leg. You can do more if you want, but you can actually do this with just one leg. And you're going to add bones to it. And then you're going to copy it around the spider, and you're going to be able to change the scale of it. You can even change the geometry if you like, so they don't look all identical. But the first part of this, since it's a quick project, is I want to show you a few different ways to actually make a leg. Since you're not going to be, I don't suggest you do it using a box like we usually do. We're going to do it with curves, okay, and revolve a curve. This is called lathe in a lot of other modeling programs. In Maya, it's called revolve. And so we're going to start by going to the curves menu over here, finally getting away from polymodeling. And we're going to choose this third icon from the left, the EP curve tool. And this is a little different than curves you might be used to in Illustrator or something like that. I'm in a side view right now, so you don't want to do this in a 3D view. And you want to pay attention to where the zero, the origin is, which is right in the middle of my screen here. Okay, the darker lines. Because you want to be drawing this curve on top of that axis, okay? It's not critical, but it is going to make things a little easier for you. You can always modify it after the fact. So the way these EP curves work is you click once and you get a point, and you click twice and you get another point. You don't see anything except a straight line at this point. And then the third time you click, you'll actually see a curve, and that's what kind of defines this as a third-degree Nurbs curve, and you don't really need to know much more than that. Third click actually shows the curve, and I'm just going to keep clicking, and I can click and drag, okay, and start to create a profile. And a profile just means the shape that's going to be used to revolve to make this curve look like a leg. Okay, and it's going to look like a furniture leg at first. So it's not going to look spidery at all, but we'll deal with that later. So I've got a bunch of things here, okay, and I'm trying not to exaggerate it too much, because remember it's going to be reflected on both sides of this. So you're going to see essentially double what you see here. So when you're done with the curve, you can hit enter, and then you'll actually see this guy. And you'll notice that by default this guy is coming in with its center point defined as 0, 0, 0 here. Okay, and that's why you really want to orient yourself so you know where this thing is. So I can edit it at this point. I can right click on it and choose Control Vertex. Notice I have different things here than I normally would see on a poly object. And I'll talk about that in a second too. So this differs a lot from Illustrator curves in that Illustrator curves, the anchor points are always on the line. Okay, here, because this is a different type of curve, they're actually off the line. So you can kind of think of this as a weight. As you pull this, it's pulling the tension of this curve higher and higher. Okay, and you can see how you can move it down. And this, I'm kind of doing this because this is something you want to avoid. You don't want a curve to go beneath this line, or when you revolve it, you're going to get intersections and it's going to look god awful and it's not going to render right. Okay, so you want to keep that above the line. Okay, so if I zoom in on this, you'll kind of see what's what here. Okay, so I can edit this at this point if I want. I would say probably don't edit it at this point, because you can also edit it after you make the object. Okay, so unless it's grossly like the wrong length or something like that, don't worry too much about getting this right at this point. The main thing you want is you want to have enough points. Don't make a curve that just has like 3 or 4 points. That's going to just give you a bunch of grief. Okay, you want to have enough where you can actually manipulate this. And then I'm going to show you another way to do this using Illustrator and bringing that into Maya as well after I do this one. Okay, so I get out of here, I go to object mode. Okay, and then to actually revolve this thing, I go to the surfaces menu. Okay, and then revolve and the option box right here. Okay, and I'm going to reset this so you can see what this is going to look like when you come in. Okay, so this axis is really the crucial thing. Okay, and I'm just going to tap out of this and go to this space here. So if I just do this with the default, which is Y in this case, and click apply, I'm going to get this dinner plate looking thing. Okay, that's not what I want. Okay, so the axis you're looking for is the one that goes along the length of the curve. Okay, so in this case it looks like Z. So I'm going to click Z, click apply, and now I can see this guy that looks like this. Okay, and then notice it's black. Okay, all that really means is that the curve started on the left and ended on the right. You can undo that if you like and click on your curve here and choose Curves Reverse Direction. It's going to look exactly the same, but it's going to pretend as if it started on this side and went this way. But if I click Apply, I'm going to see this like this. You can also do that after the fact, okay? So what we end up with here, I'll just click Close at this point, is something called a Nurbs object, okay? Because it was created from a curve, it's not a poly object. So if I right click on this, you'll see I'm getting different things here. I'm getting something called an isoparm, okay? I'm getting hulls, okay, which is another different kind of a shape. Bottom line is I'm not going to explain all this as much as just say we want a poly object when we get out of this. We don't really want to work with Nurbs objects at this point, okay? So I'm just going to undo this. And again, you can do this after the fact. It's not essential, but I want to show you how to set it up beforehand so you can get a poly object right off the bat, okay? So I'm going to go back to my Surfaces menu, Revolve, click the option box. I'm going to leave it on Z, which is the thing I found was correct. Okay. And over here, you'll see I have output geometry. So I can change this to polygons. When I do that, I get all kinds of options here. Okay. The easiest one to really just use is this one called control points. What that's going to use is the points on the curve to make polygons. Okay. And if I click Apply, it's going to look god-awful, okay? It'll look really strange. But if I hit the 3 key, it's going to smooth it out, okay? And that actually now is a poly object, okay? And you can see it's backwards again, okay? Since it's a poly object, I can just go to my Mesh Display menu and choose Reverse, and I'll be able to see that with the normals flipped, okay, correctly. So that works just fine, like this, okay? There's no, no really more need to do anything more than that at this point. I'm going to close this like that. And the other cool thing about doing things like this with curves is the curve is actually linked to the shape you generate. So if I go to Control Vertex here and click on this point, you'll see that this will actually modify the poly shape after the fact. So that's kind of cool. Okay, because now this thing is editable at this point. You're not going to want to leave it like that for long, but you can manipulate it while it's in this state, and at some point, decide, okay, it's okay, or it's okay enough to work with, okay? I'll just leave this as is. Now, if you did end up with some of your points under this axis, this Z-axis, you'll see this kind of thing happening. That's really what you want to avoid. These infinitely small points here, where this flips, nothing good can come of that, okay? So just get those things above the surface, okay? Now the same thing might happen if you made your curve, here I'm going to just get rid of this, if you made your curve and you had it higher on this axis like this, let's say, and I'll just move this down so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Let's say you had your pivot point down here and you drew your curve up here instead of close. When you actually make your revolve here, you're going to get this kind of a thing happening. Okay, it's going to be super big because it's still trying to revolve around this point, okay, this central point here that you want to stay away from. Okay, so if that happens, you can just undo. Okay, you can hit the D key. You can change this pivot point. Okay, and D just toggles this on and off. This edit pivot. Put it wherever you want here, like this. Hit D again, and then go ahead and revolve. And you're going to get essentially what we got in the first place. Okay, and I'm still on polygon because I had that set originally. You don't need to set those settings each time. They're going to stick once you do it the first time. Okay, so if I click reverse, I'll see this. Okay, so that's one way to go. Okay, and once you have this poly object, then you can start to do more things with this, okay? And what I would suggest immediately is try to get it looking less symmetrical, okay? So easiest way to do that is, for me, is to hit the soft select, that's the B key on your keyboard. Hold down the B key and drag your left mouse button, okay, however you want to go here, to change the scale of this guy. Okay, that's the range that this is going to affect. And then just pick a component. So if I pick like vertex here, you'll see this yellow indicates where this is actually going to affect things. As it moves to red, it's going to be less influential on those vertexes. And where it hits black, it's not going to affect those at all. Okay, so if I start to do something like this, I can do so. And I can change this at any point. So if I hit more than one of these, you'll see it's affecting more of an area as well. Okay, so if I want this thing to be, you know, just a little more funky looking, again, hold the B key down and drag with your mouse. You can increase or decrease that range of influence dramatically. Okay, and this is another thing I might want to do with something like this is turn B off. Okay, and grab some verts like this and just hit the R key and scale these so they're kind of flat, and then move them up. Okay, so sometimes having a flat shape, again R, and this is in vertex mode. And you want to do this in a side view so you're not missing verts as you do this. Okay, if you pick them and you want to drag over them like this so you're getting them on both sides of your shape, like so, and I'm just hitting the W key and dragging these down. So you can see this scale thing is a really, really useful way to modify shapes so they don't have perfect symmetry, or they're symmetrical but not on every axis. So hit the R key, scale these flat like this, so you get this nice flat shape. And then I can W and I can move that wherever I like. And suddenly I have something that is, you know, curvy on one side and kind of different on the other side. Okay, so that can be kind of fun to do. I can go out here, okay, take a look at this guy. So another thing I might want to do is maybe take an edge. Okay, like grab an edge from like here to, let's say here, like that. Okay, and hit the R key here. I can scale that flat. Another interesting thing you can do with stuff like this is you can hit the D key and you can actually move the pivot of the selection you have like this, hit D again, and then for instance I can hit the E key and kind of lift this by rotating it. See, this part on the left where I've moved the pivot to is not changing, but this part is changing, okay, pretty dramatically. So I can get really interesting bony shapes by doing things like that. And again, I'm not even on the B key at this point. I'm not using soft select. I'm just moving stuff around, okay? And if I did want to make some more dramatic stuff, hit B, select that one edge, you know, pull that up, maybe reduce the influence a bit, so it really just affects the top half of this thing, like that. And we get this interesting blade kind of shapes that are kind of cool to play around with, okay? So anyway, that is then going to be our spider leg that we can put bones into, which is going to be the next part of this, and tell it where we want this thing to bend and pose, okay? So this back end, maybe I want to take this and just scale this down. I've got B still on here. Maybe I want that to be a little more delicate, kind of like that. That's kind of cool, okay? That. Again, lots and lots of things you can do with this. Double click that, turn B off, maybe scale that a bit too. Grab this guy. Once I get going on this, I hate to stop. So sorry if this video runs too long. So that kind of thing. Anyway, it's kind of fun to just noodle around with things like that. Okay, and one thing these Nurbs curves aren't great at doing is actually making sharp corners and things like that. And for that, I'm going to show you a different technique using Illustrator instead. So at this point, I want to detach this thing from the original curve because I've modified it so much that curve is really just going to mess things up if I try and do stuff with it. So the simple way to do that is just click on the object, okay, and then you go to your poly menu and you delete the history, this thing. So that essentially detaches it from this. Click on that, it's gone. This curve will no longer have any effect on this, okay? So that thing is a completely separate thing now that you don't have to worry about. You might want to keep it, leave it hanging around. I usually stick things like that in a just in a layer, and I hide the layer so I have those pieces if I need them later, because it's just kind of useful to keep until you know you don't need them anymore. Not a bad practice to get into. Sometimes you'll just have some weird catastrophic thing happen, you have to rebuild stuff. So that's not a bad way to go. Okay, so the next step I'm going to show you is Illustrator version of this. Okay, and then we're going to add bones, and then I'm going to actually show you how to make a mechanical version of this too, where the leg doesn't bend, but you use parts that creak and move at certain pivot points. Okay, so that's it for this one. Stay tuned.